Dmitry Bivol does the unthinkable and stuns the boxing world by beating the pound for pound king Canelo Alvarez. Did you see it coming? I didn't. Also, on today's podcast, we'll be talking about a huge exhibition bout as Floyd Mayweather gets set to return to the ring. A former British world champion announces his retirement, and there's quite a few exciting fights to discuss on tonight's podcast. This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, proudly sponsored by Spartans Law, and this is podcast 52 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. Delighted to be joined by the face of Lights Out, the MVP of Lights Out, the main man of Lights Out, the Cristiano Ronaldo, the Mo Salahs, the Sadio Manes, the Akshay Kumars, the Amitabh Bachchans, the Tiger Shroffs, whatever famous character he wants to familiarize himself with. It's Mohsin Gulshit, aka Ronald Jeremy. Ron, how you doing, mate?
Pleasure to be back on again, mate.
Yeah,
Love the interaction.
Oh, listen, mate. When it comes to your interaction, it's just one of the many high points I've got about you. I'm always singing your praises. I'm always telling all my closest friends how much of a great guy you are, and how good you've been for Lights Out over the years. Podcasts are never the same without you, but you put on a hard bargain today, mate. That's for sure. It was hard to get you
and before we go on, I want to say a massive congratulations to you and the missus.
Thank you.
With your new little one in the world. What have you named him? Just for the viewers out there.
You can't.
Khan. I think that's the name I'm hearing.
It's Mohammed Salahuddin Kiani, the little boy's name. I couldn't really get Mo Salah in there, so I just had to think of the name.
Thank God. I mean, from the pictures I've seen, thank God he's gone on the missus. That's all I've got to say. Let's swiftly move on.
Well, yeah, listen, thank you. And congratulations to you too, becoming an uncle. Let me know when you're free to babysit. Before we obviously get started, just want to remind the viewers out there, if they can, please make sure you hit that subscribe button for more Lights Out Boxing content. Want to keep up to date with us, check us out on all the social media platforms. Links are going to be below in the description. Links for this podcast, if you want to listen to on any of the audio platforms, is going to be below in the description after this podcast. And we've also got another announcement to make. As you guys know, my brother Asif Khan, Chris Eubank Jr.'s #1 fan, is also doing a 7-a-side football tournament in Luton, Bedfordshire. If you fancy yourself as a footballer and you've got a good football team out there and you want to make a bit of history by coming down to win our first ever tournament, please feel free to check out the details. They're on the Lights Out Instagram story. But if you can't get through to our Lights Out Instagram story, just feel free to drop us a message and email. All of our links are below in the description, and sign up to win some prizes, including trophies and medals and a £100 voucher to a new and up-and-coming dessert shop in Luton. We've got a lot to discuss today, and obviously we have to start off with what went down at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas as Dmitry Bivol stunned Canelo Alvarez. That's right, guys. You heard it here first. Canelo Alvarez suffered an L, beaten by Dmitry Bivol. A result that pretty much none of us seen coming, but it's happened. It's a win for Dmitry Bivol. He remains undefeated. Canelo Alvarez, a lot of questions asked, a lot of eyebrows raised, especially with the performance that he put in. But let's just start off by talking about the obvious, Ron. Bivol won the fight. Rightfully deserved to win the fight. He was a better fighter. I'm glad he never got robbed. Were you surprised with how well Bivol fought?
I mean, I'm with you, and with the bookies, I had Bivol as a massive underdog. Hello, he's a superstar. He's a cash cow of boxing. He's the face of boxing. He's the #1 pound for pound. I didn't see it coming. But I was extremely kind of impressed with Bivol's performance. He had a game plan. He executed it really well. He kept that distance. He used that reach advantage and that height advantage. And I can't remember kind of Canelo landing too much flush on the face. A lot of the kind of hits that Bivol took were on the arm, and that's what he said at the end. That look, my arms are really bruised, but my face is fine. And he negated, kind of Canelo's strengths. I think that was really important as well in that fight. All in all, I was just going by Bivol's kind of last few performances. None of them really kind of stood out for me. In particular, his performance against, Craig Richards, and everyone was kind of writing him off, and then everyone was saying how, they've just cherry picked another fighter, for Canelo's kind of resume, already an impressive resume, to look even better now, to get another win on his belt, at someone who's bigger than him. What do you make of it? What do you think of it?
You know what, right? I have to be brutally honest with you, which is a line we see a lot used for YouTube channels in their titles. I was stunned by how well this guy performed. I mean, you just have to state the obvious. It was a boxing masterclass. It wasn't a lucky night at the office. It wasn't, Canelo had an off day. Canelo fought the same way he did last night that he's done in his last 3 or 4 fights. His performance was kind of similar to Callum Smith. He was targeting the arms, and he
couldn't impose himself. He was trying his best to kind of really go in and fight short. But what I really was impressed by Bivol was he'd throw a few flurries, and then he would move back, and then he would kind of engage again, rather than kind of staying in the pocket and taking a lot of damage. And I thought that was a really good boxing plan. And Canelo didn't know what to do, really.
Yeah.
He was a bit frustrated, out of ideas, really.
Do you know what, right? Bivol did something that someone said to me, that if you want to beat Canelo, you have to do it this way. I remember when I was covering Eubank versus Williams in Cardiff back in February, and I'd done an interview with Johnny Nelson. And at the time, there was a lot of rumors circulating around the boxing world that Canelo would be going up to cruiserweight at some point, looking to fight Usyk. And Johnny Nelson, being a former world champion of the cruiserweight division, I asked him, but what if Canelo in your day had climbed up to cruiserweight? And Johnny Nelson turned around and just said, listen, there's no chance in hell I would have allowed this guy to come up into my division, my territory, my domain, and try and think he could walk all over us. I would have bullied him. I would have showed him whose division this is. I would have not let a super middleweight come all the way up to cruiserweight and, let him plan on what he's doing. I would have made it a horrible night for him. And that's exactly what Bivol did. Obviously, there's a bit of a difference between light heavyweight and cruiserweight, but Bivol showed us that he showed the boxing world that this light heavyweight division, this is Bivol's division. Regardless of who you have as the number one face of that division, right now it's Bivol. Because Bivol has got something on his CV that none of these light heavyweights have got, and that he's got the best name in boxing right now.
Can I ask you a question? You meant, I totally agree with you. He's made a name for himself. Does he join that pound for pound list now as a result of that win? Where do you put him in that? Where do you put him in that rankings?
Look, you've got to put him in the top 8, the top 6. I'm not too sure about the top 5, but look, this guy has just gonna be a pound for pound king. You can't discredit this. I mean, yes, we all know Canelo beat Kovalev at this weight, and he's won a world title at this weight, but the biggest two faces in that division before this fight were always Beterbiev and Bivol.
Yep.
Right? There's a lot of questions about Bivol in regards to his performance with Craig Richards. But this guy won a masterclass of a boxing performance on Saturday night. He did not allow Canelo to gain any rhythm. He kept Canelo at his distance. And when Canelo was closing in, there was nothing in Canelo's performance that made you think, okay, do you know what? I look at this and I think he can actually beat Bivol in a rematch. Because I just thought that it was one step too many. I know Canelo's dares to be great, and I know he wants to go on and break records, and I know he wants to try and copy what the likes of the Roy Jones Jr.'s did, the James Lights Out Tonys did. But on Saturday night for me was just a step too far, and it wasn't a close fight. Canelo had an off day. He got beaten by the better man on the night.
Were you surprised? I mean, talking about it wasn't a close fight. Were you surprised by the results of the scorecards? I mean, 115, 113, all 3 judges.
I believe me and Montel were discussing this on the WhatsApp group, and I said before the scorecards were read out, you were obviously asleep. You caught the fight out the next day, and I goes, either he'll get robbed, or the scorecards are going to be a lot closer than they shouldn't be. And as you said, 115 to 113. I had Canelo winning 3 rounds at best. There was some rounds where this guy had Canelo on the back foot, on the ropes, and he looked, I wouldn't say massively hurt Canelo, but he phased Canelo. And Canelo, for the first time in his career, apart from Floyd Mayweather, which, you can't knock the guy because Floyd, for me, is the greatest of all time. But for the first time in this tremendous run that he's been on, Canelo looked like he never had any answers for this guy. It looked like when it got to round, he just gave up. He thought, no.
It looked like he was out of ideas. He just, that reach advantage really kind of made him struggle. But I would have thought that Callum Smith would have done the same thing, but he wasn't able to execute that same plan.
I just think the guys, Canelo's been campaigning at 160, 168 for many years. Yeah, he had that one fight at light heavyweight, but he come up against a younger and a fresher guy, and this guy is the future of that
Who's
division.
in the peak of his career at the moment? Let's just be honest. He's not on the downhill like Kovalev was. I think that Kovalev victory was impressive. Say what you want, regardless of however Kovalev is, he is a bigger man, but you've got someone in their prime, in their peak condition. So let's. I mean, they've it's a rematch now. Yeah. And you think it goes the same way?
Well, that's obviously the next question. Can Canelo win? I don't think he can. I honestly don't think he could. It's
okay. If you were his coach, I mean, let's be. If you were in his corner, I mean, what would you do differently? Clearly, what the game plan they had in mind, just bully him, walk him down, get him up against the ropes, unleash, flurries of punches that really hurt, because we know the immense power that Canelo has. That didn't work. I think Bivol was too clever. He had really good footwork. He would engage, with a few flurries, then move back, then get in the range again. He didn't want to fight Canelo's fight.
What I would do different is, if I was Eddie Reynoso, I'd say, listen, you're allowed to hit this guy on the face and the body as well, not just his arms.
Yeah.
Not every fighter you can't just focus on taking their arms out.
Yeah.
Some of the muscle these guys pack on their arms is on another level, and it's not going to work all the time. It might have worked with Callum Smith and it might have worked with other fighters in those lower divisions. It ain't going to work on these, these beasts, because that's what they are. Bivol, Beterbiev, they're beasts. They're much heavier. They've campaigned at this division now for a number of years. And again, like you said, the flurries, there wasn't much there. Bivol, he fought the right fight, punches in bunches, stayed behind the jab, and then he picked the perfect time to go in with those flurries. And he never fought, he never let his emotions get the better of him. When he had success.
Yeah, there was that moment where they were both, Canelo was goading him on. Yeah. And he turned it back. He was like, no, I'm going to carry on doing what I'm doing.
Bivol fought Bivol's fight. That's exactly.
It was disciplined. It was well disciplined. And
I just want to read out some of the comments that we had on one of our Instagram polls that I did the other day. I wanted to get people's feedback on what they thought of what went wrong for Canelo. John Gotti 410, slow feet and too much muscle. That's a point I actually agree with. Another comment was from Xavier Miller, the trainer and head coach of Dillian Whyte. Too big, too strong. Canelo is still special, but belongs at middleweight or super middleweight. Mm-hmm. Dean Collins 2829. He couldn't get past the jab and close the distance and break the defense. Another comment was from yourself, Mohsin Gulshir, outboxed. And then another comment from Dan Lacey _0, threw all punches as power punches. Again, something else I agree with. There was no basic 1-2s. There was no combinations. There was nothing behind his punches. He never set himself up like he normally would do. And in the end, he just paid the price for it. And look, I mean, we've seen what he's done in the past with Billy Joe Saunders. We've seen how he stopped Caleb Plant. But Canelo, for me, has always struggled with fighters that have got good movement, and that's why I thought he'd struggle against Billy Joe Saunders, because Billy Joe Saunders, for me, a fighter that I followed quite closely throughout his career, has always had good movement, but in the end, eventually, he sussed out Billy Joe Saunders. But for me, I've always seen Canelo struggle against fighters with movement, and Saturday night proved to be the point. You asked me if he wins the rematch. I don't think he does, but I think from what I've heard today, Bivol's done an interview with Behind the Gloves. Shout out to Behind the Gloves. And Bivol said he's willing to go down to super middleweight if it's for the undisputed titles. And Bivol's campaigned at super middleweight before, and he said he's willing to do it at 168 pounds. That's the only way I see Canelo winning this fight. I just think that this is a step too much. And I know it's not that much difference in terms of the weight, but there is a bit of a difference when you're fighting fighters like Bivol and Beterbiev, fighters that have campaigned at this weight for a very long time. Do you think he wins the rematch?
It's difficult, isn't it? You know, with watching that last performance, you know, you sometimes get an indication, oh, you could do this differently, you could do that differently. I agree with the points that you've made. If it's at a catch weight or maybe a super middleweight, then you know it falls more in his favor. But look, if you looked at the two fighters, they didn't look like a massive difference. You know, it's just the height difference that kind of emphasized it a little bit more.
Nonetheless, it's going to be very.
I mean, it's the power. The weight you're walking around, the power you're throwing. Yeah, different game.
And we don't know how his training camp went as well.
Yeah,
we don't know what his training camp was like.
I mean, look, I appreciate that he didn't say, you know, put excuses and blames like a fighter, you know, who's been amazing as he has would have done. You know, someone who's fought the elite, the best of the best. And I appreciate that, you know, he gave respect where it was due. And let's be honest, Bivol's kind of ruined Eddie Hearn's big payday, you know, with that third fight against Triple G. So,
well, this is it opens doors for Golovkin to look at the likes of the Eubanks, maybe one of the Charlos. I mean, you know, a defeat could mean, you know, bigger possibilities. But look, there's no bigger fight out there for Golovkin right now than Canelo. But you've heard what Canelo said. We understand that there was a rematch clause in the contract. We're going to get set for a rematch.
It doesn't end like this. It doesn't end like this.
It does not end like this at all. There will be a rematch. And I personally thought the location I know the T-Mobile Arena is considered one of the best locations in boxing for American fans. I thought the location for a Canelo fight was just ridiculous, man. I mean, like, Canelo is the biggest face in boxing, one of the biggest faces in boxing, and he's got to be fighting in, you know, the AT&T Arena, or he's got to be fighting at MSG, you know. But we've heard Eddie Hearn during last week saying the plan is to get him into the UK to fight at least once. Why not bring that fight to the UK?
Wow.
But we know now Bivol is the guy that holds all the cards. I know financially Canelo's on another level, but as long as Bivol's got that win over him, listen, mate, you know, Bivol might play devil's advocate.
He demands a lot more money now, man. He's not going to do it for the pennies that he
deserves it. Let's listen, Ron.
And he's not obligated to fight him again. I mean, well, I get contractually, yes, but it's not for any titles. He's not losing any belts over it.
Well, Ron, look. You know what, right? I just feel sometimes in this game, right, the winning fighter doesn't get the credit that he deserves. Like, one guy that I actually feel sorry for is Usyk. Because when you talk to the people close in AJ's corner, the Eddie Hearns and the Rob McCrackens, the excuse is the game plan was all wrong. But you never heard him once turn around and be like, he lost to the better man on the night. Let's not, you know, look at the fact that Canelo was up at light heavyweight. And let's not look at the fact that it was an off night. Let's just be brutally honest. Again, a line I'm going to use. He lost to the guy that was a better man, and he executed a better game plan. Before we move on, just a few comments. Boxing lover. Canelo got bullied by a true 175 pounds fighter. Boxing TV. Hi, guys. Canelo didn't throw a jab all fight. I'd like to see Canelo make Bivol think twice before walking into boxing range with that jab. Some very, very good comments there. Thank you, guys. Keep them coming. Let's move on. Because Mr. 50-0, TBE, you know, Pretty Boy, more nicknames than Apollo Creed, is back in the ring on Saturday night, I believe at the Burj Khalifa, at the top of Burj Khalifa, wherever it is, and he takes on Don Moore in an exhibition bout. Don Moore done a bit of research about him, watched a few of his fights, 17-1, I think he is. We spoke about this, Ron. You know, I think when you look at exhibition bouts, when we really started touching on this was the whole Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. We've obviously had different opinions of it back then, but it's been a regular thing now. We've seen Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. We've seen Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul, and now we've seen Floyd Mayweather and Don Moore. given the fact that now it's becoming an extended period in boxing where we're seeing more and more of these exhibition bouts, are you warming to them, or does your feelings still stay the exact same as they were before?
Oh, look, we're going to see more of it. This is a boxer's, once they're retired, a way to make money and generate revenue, really. Let's be honest, with TV channels. And so, look, whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. And people who didn't have the privilege of watching kind of Floyd Mayweather, during his prime, like us, they can still watch him in action. I don't. What I mean is, they're not going to take it proper seriously. You won't see any brutal knockouts. There's probably things written into contracts, so it's kind of like semi-staged to some degree, isn't it? So, am I going to pay to watch it? No. Am I going to stay up late to watch it? No. So it's not something that really gets me out of bed. But there's another fight that's coming up that I'm more excited about, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So,
yeah, do you know what? Right, I'll say one thing. Okay, am I a big fan of these exhibition bouts? No, and I'm exactly like you. I'm not going to stay up late. I'm not going to pay for it. But one thing I am glad that these exhibition bouts do offer some undercard coverage, and on that undercard you've got the likes of Badu Jack fighting on it. So, it's that is one of the plus sides for it. However, I still feel as if with what we've been through with the pandemic and how a lot of the up and coming fighters have suffered, we've seen things such as what Marcus Rashford's done with the school dinners. There's been a lot of people that have sort of got together and helped out people in difficult financial situations, such as this whole school dinner process thing, which I thought Marcus Rashford did tremendously well with. I would like to see one of these faces say, do you know what? Here's so and so millions of dollars or whatever. Let's pump this into our next generation of boxers that are going to be the future of the sport, and hopefully we could find the next Floyd Mayweather, the next Oscar De La Hoya. Hopefully this money will bring through a good crop of fighters, because the sport suffered a lot. I know personally a lot of fighters that have suffered a lot through the pandemic that aren't even fighting anymore. And when you're getting millions and millions of pounds to have an exhibition bout where there's no winner, there's no loser, and you just
it's partly scripted. Let's be honest. It's
really scripted, and it's just it's a shame for these youngsters, But look,
good luck to him. Look, he's still making money and he's still relevant in boxing. Where are they fighting? On top of a helipad, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if we will ever kind of experience that again. A fight that's up in the air. I don't know how many meters, but.
Well, best of luck to him. I'll watch the highlights because, just like you, I loved watching Floyd Mayweather as a kid. He's 44 now, I believe, and he's still getting in the ring. He's still taking that slight risk. One punch could change everything. He's not a young Floyd Mayweather anymore. But listen, if that's what tickles your fancy, then fair enough. Kel Brook announced his retirement from boxing the other day. I was very shocked, because I was hoping that we'd get. Well, I actually thought he'd fight again. From what I was hearing, that talks with Chris Eubank Jr. were progressing well, and then I woke up to Michael Benson's and Mike Coppedge's tweets. Kel Brook has announced his retirement from boxing. Apparently, the talks with Chris Eubank Jr. Went south, and that fight's not happening. But when you look at it in a whole, it's probably the right decision. And I don't think the guy could have gone out any higher. For how many years he was chasing that fight with his longtime rival Amir Khan, and he put in that tremendous performance on February the 19th at the AO Arena in Manchester. I think it's the right decision. I'm a fan of Kel Brook. I've always watched the majority of his fights. I remember staying up late to watch his fight with Crawford. I remember going up to Sheffield when he fought Spence. I remember in 2013, as a young kid, tuning into his fight with Sean Porter, former world champion, former British champion. And listen, he went out the best way possible. He beat Amir Khan. No two ways about it. Phenomenal career, great fighter. Could he have achieved more? Every fighter out there could have achieved more. But listen, we have to pay credit to the man. Looking back on the career of Special K, Babe, would you say it was a successful career run, or do you think there was something missing?
Well, how many people can say they were world champions in such a great division as well, the welterweight division? Look, I think we spoke about this after that. We did a review after the fight, and we sang his praises, and this is the right time to go out. He's suffered some really tough injuries as well. The orbital bone damage against Triple G and against Errol Spence as well. So walking away with a couple of quid in his pocket with his health intact, that's the main thing for him. He's done. He's been a credit to the sport, and he's not going to be short on work with in terms of media, kind of analyzing fights. So yeah, I think it's the right move. What was there to gain out of kind of fighting Eubank? I mean, a couple of mil here and there. But in the grand scheme of things, if he had lost, and everyone would have been like, well, look, he's past it. He's 35, 36 years of age. Time to hang up the gloves. I think there's some things that are more important, like health, rather than making a couple of quid and having massive regrets later on in life, thinking, why did I do that? One fight too many. Mm-hmm. Beat Amir Khan. He's got the bragging rights in the Yorkshire, Lancashire kind of rivalry they had. So you settle that score. Enjoy it, and people will remember you for that fight, amongst other fights as well that you've mentioned.
I'm actually interested to see what that means for that rematch clause in the contract, because obviously we all understand that Amir Khan, if you watch Meet the Khans, he still wants that rematch. I mean, what does that mean for contractual obligations? Let's just hope Kel Brook doesn't end up going to court and getting sued. But I hope Amir Khan looks at this. And
look, that fight, yeah, you would take, fine, because we saw what Kel Brook did. Absolutely, bossed him in that fight, and he didn't look in any trouble. There was nothing in Amir Khan's performance I thought, oh, hold on a minute, if they did a rematch, that he would really trouble him. He just looked defeated throughout. But against a different proposition, someone who can withstand a lot more kind of power and punches in Eubank, we know what he's like with his chin. Why put yourself through that? At least with Amir Khan, what you've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and you. I think that's worth the risk, not the Chris Eubank Jr. kind of fight.
Yeah, and as you said, man, he's absorbed a lot of punishment as well. The eye orbitals and those fights with Golovkin and Spence. He was never quite the same fighter again. And I just think, like, had he fought Amir Khan again and had he lost, then there's a third fight. There's potential. There's those training camps. Then they've got to go through it over and over again. And I think Amir Khan looks at this and thinks, you know what, maybe it's best I call it a day too. And
Amir Khan looked, at the end of that fight, he doesn't look like he.
You know what? People say that they have the fighter that loses this fight has to live with it for the rest of their life. I think they for a couple of months, yeah, but then after that, you just get over it. You fighters lose fights. It is what it is. You don't. Amir Khan's not going to dwell on this defeat to Kel Brook for the rest of his life. You saw that there was mutual respect there after the fight. That's the main thing. Had Kel Brook had glanced around him and paraded him and taunted him, yeah, I just beat you, or yeah, I stopped you, then you could say, all right, fair enough. But the fact that there was mutual respect, these guys should think, do you know what? We gave the fans what we wanted. Might have been 4 or 5 years late, but we still did it. We still put on that spectacle because that's what it was. And we were both former world champions. We both had great careers. We both made enough money. Go off into the sunset now. Become a pundit, or a trainer or whatever. But enjoy your retirement, Kel Brook. A very, very successful career. Boxing action this weekend. We'll start off this Friday night's fight at the Indigo at the O2 Arena. Wasserman Boxing are putting on their first show of the year on Channel 5. Denzel Bentley versus Linus Udofia for the British middleweight title. Denzel Bentley, a former British champion. Linus Udofia, just like us, Ron, a fellow Lithuanian. trying to become the first British champion from Luton for the first time since I think it's Billy Schwer. I'm not too sure, but yeah,
now you're really running back the clock there.
100%. Nonetheless, great fight. Bentley's done it before. Can he become a two-time British middleweight champion? And has the experience of the fights with the likes of the Mark Heffrons and the Phoenix Cash is going to slightly give him the upper hand going into his fight with Linus Udofia?
Well, look, we're going to be Team Luton here. We're going to be Team Linus here, you know.
I don't know. I'm sitting on the fence. I know both guys very well.
Well, look, I'm gonna side with Linus here.
Both guys to return home safe to their families. That's what I want. And I want a great fight.
Absolutely. I mean, they both go in with this fight with good, you know, solid records. You know, Denzel with 15 wins, one loss on his record. You know, and one drawn. And Linus, he's undefeated with 9 knockouts from 17 fights. So, you know, this is it. This is his moment. This is his moment where he, you know, he's at a good age. He's 28. He wins this British title. There's going to be so many doors that open up from him if he's able to kind of come through this. But regardless, it's going to be, you know, 2 good fighters. You know, it's going to be a good, you know, scrap for the British title. That's you've always spoken very highly about boxers going through their apprenticeship before they go on to the European, then they go on to the world level. So,
yeah, do you know what? Right, I like this fight because obviously it's 2 good British fighters. They're both good fighters, and I remember many years ago when I interviewed Denzel Bentley for the first time, and he spoke about this potentially being a fight that will happen somewhere down the line. And I'm glad that it's happening, and I'm glad that, you know, Denzel Bentley's not looked at this and thought, now I've already won the British title. Why would I want to win it again for? I'll just focus on bigger and better things. So he's given Linus that respect. And Linus has obviously won the English title. He's represented Luton well. You know, he's formerly managed by David Hay. It's a good fight, man. And it's actually a decent card. You know, you've got Josh Kelly on it as well. You've got Brad Pauls. You know, there's some good local talent. Harlem Eubank, the cousin of Chris Eubank Jr. And as you said, you know, the winner of this fight could move on to bigger and better things. I mean, you look at some of the names in this division, you know, there's still Liam Williams who's still around. You know, there's a potential rematch for Bentley versus Felix Cash if Denzel Bentley wins this fight. You know, and don't forget Chris Eubank Jr. as well. You know, he's going to be looking for an opponent now. I know obviously he was looking at a world title shot with Golovkin, and we don't know what's happening there. So the winner of this fight goes on to bigger and better things. However, having said that, you know, if I have to put a prediction on it, I would slightly favour Denzel because this is his 4th British title fight now, Ron. It's not his first, second. And that's
I get that.
Linus. I've got a lot of time for Linus Udofia. Great guy, fellow Lutonian. But, you know, I'm not going to just like not say my opinion just so it benefits, so he doesn't get disheartened, even though he wouldn't. But I go for the guy that's more experienced in these fights. And British title fights, man, you know, we've seen some barn burners over the years. You know, you look at Joshua versus White, you look at Fitzgerald versus Fowler. British title fights for me are the ones that really do, you know, live up to expectation. But who have you got as a favourite going into this fight, Ron, from what you've seen of both these fighters and knowing their records?
Linus. That's it. I'm going to be biased as hell. Linus is, you know I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Denzel, but I'm going to go Team Linus here. I just think this is his moment. And this is going to be his platform to kind of lift himself off and really announce himself to the wider public and chase those bigger fights. And look, you know, I would love for Linus to win it. Maybe one day Linus is headlining at Paddle Court, the Luton Town Stadium. You know, I mean, this is it. We've got to, as boxing fans, you know, we've got to dream big. That's it. We want a local guy to be doing that.
Look, this is exciting times for the town of Luton. He could win a British title on Friday night, and a week later, Luton Town could be promoted to the Premiership.
Mate, we can dream.
And you might actually pay your Sky bill as well.
Can we cut that bit out, please?
Only joking. Okay, well, listen, best of luck to both fighters. It's going to be a fascinating fight. On Saturday night, Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano 2, the rematch. First fight ended in a draw. It is for the undisputed super welterweight championship. First fight was pretty decent. I'm not gonna lie. I thought Brian Castano did more than enough to win. Obviously, in boxing, there's those three little things called the judges. They saw different. Look, we're talking about a guy. Look, before we talk about our prediction and before we talk about what we make of the first fight, and what's gonna happen, I've got to say, man, these Charlo brothers, they do a lot of talking. They talk a lot, and this has to be the all right. This is where I think they're at in their career right now. Yeah, no one is talking about this fight. Absolutely nobody. You look at the latest trends of boxing on Twitter, on social media, Canelo and the Bivol fight, and then obviously the Floyd Mayweather fight, of course, his exhibition. And then it's a lot about the Denzel Bentley fight. There's not much hype surrounding this fight. That is because these Charlo brothers are wasting their time in their career. And I know they've won world titles, and I know one of them still undefeated. They're both in their 30s. Who have they fought? Nobody. You hear them a lot more talking than you do in the ring. And I honestly believe that they could be managed slightly better. I would love to see someone like an Eddie Hearn work with these guys. And I would love to see Jermell Charlo fight a Chris Eubank Jr. or a Golovkin. But you just see more notifications about these guys on social media than you do in the ring. And the fact that this is for an undisputed fight, we're talking the king of the mountain fight, the guy that is the king of the 154-pound division fight. The fact that there's no publicity surrounding it, that there's no coverage on YouTube about the build-up to the fight says it all. But I can rant and rave all day long, but I just think these are two talented fighters that are wasting their careers right now. And this guy's got to win on Saturday night, because if he doesn't, what else is he? What else can he possibly do? They constantly call out every fighter, every top 5 fighter, every top 10 fighter, and these fights never happen. And who's looking after these guys? Who's managing these guys? I'm not saying it as a dig. I'm saying it because I want to see these guys fulfill their potentials, because they're actually decent fighters. But it's just they're wasting so much time. I need to get your thoughts on this.
I totally agree with you. I mean, they've been calling out Canelo, they've been calling out all these sorts of names, but there's nothing about them. There's no kind of fanfare. There's no kind of real interest about let's get in the ring. This is one that plus, Jermell needs to come through this fight, get that W, and then move on to big fights. Getting that one fight that really makes him a household name. There is a lot of talk, a lot of hype behind these two brothers, but there isn't much proof in the pudding, as you would say. No, they've got really good career, solid careers, but that name, they haven't got that name on their record that they're desperately seeking. They've been shouting out people's names, but
yeah, at the start of the year, the other brother, Jermell Charlo, there was reports that he was close to getting the Canelo fight. And I was actually excited because I thought finally we get to see this guy in a big fight, and it never happened. And I honestly think it never happened because this guy tried biting off more than he could chew in terms of negotiations. That's what I honestly believe. Just stop all this acting on social media, get in the ring and show us what you're about. I want to see these guys fulfill their potentials. It'd be a good thing. It'd be good to have a new, fresh face in these divisions. And if Jermell Charlo does win, and if he doesn't go up, well, there's a potential fight with Tim Tszyu, Costa Tszyu's son. There's a potential fight with Liam Smith. A potential fight with Chris Eubank Jr. if they fancy doing it at catchweight. But the fight itself, like I said, I thought Castano did enough in the first fight. I think Castano doesn't need to change up anything going into the second fight. However, I want to see Jermell Charlo press this fight more. I don't want to see him get a close decision. I want to see him go out there and make a statement. And he knows for a fact, right? He probably won't say this during fight week, but he knows for a fact that if he goes out there and puts on a solid performance, maybe even takes this guy out, this will open doors for him. Why? Because he rules that 154-pound division, and he's got all the belts, and he's got a lot more to offer now. And he needs the big fights. These brothers need the big fights. What do you see going down on Saturday night when these two guys fight?
Like we said, the Charlo, there's a lot of hype around there. I just hope he can really come through this fight and set himself up for a big fight next. That's it, really. Pretty much, you've kind of nailed it on its head. That there's, we don't want to be kind of their careers to go past, and we'd be like, well, what have they actually achieved? What have they actually done? So that's it. That's the next thing. I would love to see him, over in England, fighting someone like a Eubank. I mean, any of our middleweights, I'd love to get them in the ring with.
Only time will tell. And like I said, for me, Jermell Charlo is under a lot of pressure on Saturday night, and he's got to look good. Final
look good. Absolutely, so come through this
today's podcast. Another great fight to look forward to on Saturday night is up in the heavyweight division between former Olympic gold medalist Tony Yoka, who takes on Martin Bakole. Great fight. I think obviously before we come on the podcast and we were speaking today, well, I was saying to you that I'm actually impressed with how the landscape of the heavyweight division looks right now. The fuss is not all about the top 4, top 5 fighters. I mean, we potentially got a fight between Joseph Parker and Joe Joyce, which is going to take place at some point in the summer. It's a done deal for Andy Ruiz and Luis Ortiz, and now you've got these two guys fighting. And I think when we've spoken about the heavyweight division in the past, we've always said that.
Just repeat, who did you say about Luis Ortiz? Who's he fighting?
Andy Ruiz.
Andy Ruiz, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And there's another mentioned heavyweight you didn't mention is Filip Hrgovic. Apparently he was going to fight, but
he pulled out due to obviously personal issues.
So yeah, totally agree with you there. The heavyweight division, there's a lot of kind of fanfare, a lot of kind of hype around a lot of these up and coming fighters.
Do you know what it is? I think we just need to give a break to the top 4, top 5 for a minute. We need to see. We need to start now knowing who is the next face in this division. That
next wave. Let's just put it.
And the Usyks. Yeah. We need to sort of see the future of this division. And like I said, Yoka, Bakole, Ortiz, Ruiz, Hrgovic, Zhang, Parker versus Joyce, and you've also Daniel Dubois, Bryant as well. Those are 10 top heavyweights that are going to fight each other. We could potentially be looking at a Robin round sort of, little mix going on here. And whoever wins this fight, listen, if they put themselves right in the mix, maybe for, I don't know, the European title or a final eliminator, but this is a good fight. This is a fight that's been postponed before. I'm really, really looking forward to this fight. However, we have to give a prediction, and we have to obviously discuss and break down what goes on in the fight. Tony Yoka's got a great amateur background, but Martin Bakole under Billy Nelson is a massively improved fighter. And I just think because, let's not look at the fact that he's going into someone else's backyard. Bakole's going in there with nothing to lose. A lot of people have hyped up Tony Yoka. Maybe that hype might not, we might not see the reason behind that hype, or we might. But I'm a big fan of this fight because, like I said, we're giving a break to the top 5 right now, which is what we need to do, because I think the last 2 years we've just solely focused on Fury, Usyk, Joshua Wilder, White. The only big fight we've had since that in this division is Dubois versus Joe Joyce, and that was in the pandemic, and that was without the fans. So it's good to see now we've got 5 good fights to look forward to. What's your feeling on this fight, Ron?
I'm gonna go with Tony Yoka. You're right. There's always been a lot of hype around him. Good amateur pedigree, 6'7", and there's not much coming through Europe, isn't it? Like France as well. I mean, when's the last time France produced a really good boxer? That was how long ago? I mean, that was years ago. So
David Hayes.
Yeah. So Martin Bakole, he's only got the 1 defeat on his record from what I remember against Michael Hunter. It was a 10th round knockout. So I think, it would be a good fight. And the winner is, like you said, I like this whole idea about the round robin that you mentioned. Could that set up a fight against Filip Hrgovic? Could that set up a fight against any of the other people that are on the cusp of the top 6 heavyweight division? That are trying to break into that.
Ron, was that there was rumors around social media that Michael Hunter could be fighting Hughie Fury again. Another good
Oh
heavyweight.
God, I like that. I like the sound of that. That sounds like a really good fight.
There's a chance of Derek Chisora's still about.
Oh my God.
Ulev's still about. He glassed me. You know, this you could. Dillian White's still about. Do you know what I mean? There's so many fights that we could see in this heavyweight division, and I just wish these promoters, managers would get their act together and be like, do you know what? Let's work.
What about a boxing super series with heavyweights?
Well, I'll hopefully be bumping into Callis Island on Wednesday.
Just that, man. You know what? Pick 8 of those. You know those names that we mentioned.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, the likes of Dillian White are not going to be bothered with a super series because, rightly so. But all those names that we've just mentioned, they would love to win a Muhammad Ali trophy and get their names up there and say to, you know,
I'm gonna have to stop it, because if you remember when Chisora was fighting Joseph Parker at the press conference, and it was on the Regis Prograis versus Josh Taylor card, and they asked Chisora about the fight, and Chisora goes, before answering this question, I just want to know who's the number 1 fight and who's the main chief on this show. And Eddie Hearn kind of tried avoiding the question, saying, listen, you know, you are the main event, but the main event is going to be Taylor versus Prograis. And then Chisora was like, well, I'm not going to sell out the O2 to my London fans for the Muhammad Ali trophy. You know, who gives a fuck about it? So I don't think Chisora would be throwing his name into the hat.
But no, I mean, it's not aimed at a Chisora. I think it's aimed at these up and coming that could break into that that top 6, kind of vying for the, you know, potentially in the future vying for a world heavyweight title. Look, Tyson Fury, you know, we're not going to go on about it, but you know, what's going to happen with him? Is he going to relinquish the WBC? What happens between Joshua and Usyk? And at some point, one of those boxing organizations is going to be like, well, look, you need to, you know, vacate one of these titles, you know, that becomes available. So look, that it's like a carrot that you're dangling. And, you know, and as promoters, you're thinking, right, this is a 2-3 year project that we can start here. And I think a Muhammad Ali trophy would be ideal.
It would be, but then again, you got to look at funding and you got to look at which fighters tied up with who. You know, can they?
Yeah, that's a logistical nightmare. I guess I don't know. I mean, it sounds great.
If my auntie had balls, she'd be my uncle. You know, if so's and buts and maybes. You know, we live. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Let's get a prediction for this fight. I'm going to go for Tony Yoka on points strictly because of the experience. I don't know why, but for me, experience plays a massive part in this sport. It's experience and ring activity. I'm going to go for Tony Yoka on points. I think he'll just. I think he's a better mover than Bakole. You know, he's better behind the jab. Bakole possesses a lot of power. I just think Tony Yoka's going to have too much for him in terms of movement and in terms of simple boxing, punches and bunches, working behind the jab and sticking to a simple game plan. What about you, Ron? What's your prediction?
I'll go with you. Yeah, I think the same. You know, there's not much in it in age. They're both similar ages, but the Tony Yoka's got the experience with the amateur pedigree. I think he'll just outbox him. Yeah, so I mean, it'll be a good name on his record for Tony moving forward. But he needs to now start getting these bigger fights if he wants to be recognised as a serious contender in this division.
How do you see him winning? And who would you like to see him fight next if he does win?
You know, there's a lot of good names that you mentioned there. You've got a Hughie Fury. You've got, if he wants to be really brave, Daniel Dubois. You've got Filip Hrgovic as well. Who's the other one? The Savage, Babic. Does he fight at heavyweight?
He's at bridgerweight now, but he can still come up to heavyweight.
You know what? He's not one to turn down a challenge. I mean, I've heard his interviews, and that's another fatal fight you could bring in. You got another name you missed was Jared Anderson.
Yes,
I mean, all those names that you mentioned, there wasn't an American in there. How you know, strange is that?
You've got so many heavyweights. You could have a Royal Rumble. Ron, before we end the podcast, I've brought a new idea to the podcast. It's a quick fire question, but not the ones that we used to do before. And I just want an answer, and I want an honest answer. A super fight, a super fantasy fight. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Carl Froch, both in their prime. Who wins? I'm gonna go with Carl Froch. As
Carl
much
Froch.
as much as I love Carl Froch, the reason why I said I've picked this fight is because this fight would be an absolute scrap. I mean,
I mean, strange. Yeah, I mean, those two fighters that you put together.
Do you know why I picked this fight?
Why those two names?
Because these two fighters, you know how I said with Canelo and Bivol, that Bivol never fought with emotion. These two fighters do. These two fighters never tear up. So this is why I mean. Look at Froch versus Groves.
I mean, I'm a little bit reluctant to say Carl Froch straight away now because I think he's a much improved fighter. You know, in the last few fights compared to early on in his career.
I think Carl Froch should knock him out.
No, I mean, Eubank Jr. has got a chin. He's not been. Yeah, there's never been any fights where I think he's going to go. He's going to topple.
I actually think Carl Froch should knock Chris Eubank Jr. out if it ever happened in their primes.
I'm sure they sparred. I'm sure they have sparred. So
somebody get me the footage so I can prove my point.
I mean, when he was this was towards the end of Carl Froch's career and Eubank at the beginning of his career, so there was that bit of sparring. I don't know how that went, but
you do know that Froch fought in front of 80,000 fans at Wembley, right?
No, I did not know that. No. I'm sure he told Mayweather that as well.
And the rest of the Sky Sports audience. Anyway, listen, Ron, pleasure as always, mate, because that's all we've got time for today for podcast 52. Guys, quick reminder out there, please, if you can, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell for future notifications and some more lights out boxing content. We've got some exciting interviews and hopefully some more exciting content coming up. Ron, thank you very much, mate. Hopefully we'll get you on for podcast 53. We've got an exciting idea for podcast 53. And once again, to the viewers out there, thank you for watching podcast 52 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.